Beautiful world, hello. This is Anya Niaz, founder of the Maple Advisory Group, a global organization committed to raising the dignity of all humans involved in the education ecosystem. We're tired of so much goodness remaining invisible. So here we are, sharing this goodness with you in the form of a podcast. Unquestioned Questions, a podcast by Maple Advisory. If you're listening, well then keep on listening.
And for this conversation, I'm your host, Ajay Pinjani, and today we will be exploring: am I the end, the means, or somewhere in between? What is the positionality of teachers in the educational context? We are joined by three leading educational enthusiasts. Aarti Kanungo joins us from Delhi, India. Aarti is a teacher first, a teacher second, and a teacher all the way. Our second guest, Deciman Vandera, joins us from Kampala, Uganda. Deciman serves as a senior leadership development officer at Teach for Uganda. And our third guest is school leaders. Tamara joins us from Cambridge, UK, and is the director of networks and curriculum at Global School Leaders. Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you for having me.
Let us begin with you, Tamara. What does it feel like being a teacher?
That's a very tricky question to answer because there are so many different feelings connected to being a teacher. So it feels exciting when you're in the classroom and when you're in front of students and interacting with them. It can feel stressful when you're trying to plan a lesson and think about all of the different things that you want students to know and be able to do. It can also feel exciting as well, but also that there are other constraints on us, like syllabus requirements, resource constraints, time pressure, always, that can make the planning part quite complicated. It's exceptionally rewarding when you're in front of a student and you get that kind of instant gratification of seeing how your words and your actions are affecting them. And it can be painful as well when you see that sometimes your words and your actions and your intentions as a teacher actually aren't enough because you're one part of quite a complicated education system and social system that we have. So I guess every day it feels a bit different to be a teacher. Every minute of every day it can feel quite different. It's obviously a privilege to be a teacher, but it's also quite a complicated and often challenging job to have to.
Wow. Tamara, that means it's a very complex web somewhere. There's so many expectations. So let me move to Aarti and then, connect that point. Aarti, watching your inspirational videos and the way you demonstrate care when you teach any subject, I'm curious to know your thoughts on a few things. As a teacher, do you feel you're free to lead your classroom?
Definitely. I think we are actually artists. Like artists, they have to be free from all the mental pressure, and then only they are able to make their masterpiece. In the same way, as teachers, we have to be free from all anxieties, all tensions. We have to be mindful so that we can create beautiful human beings, craft their personalities with our love. And I think that is only when you are free to think, free to innovate, free to experiment, free to explore, and whatnot. Definitely. When you have free thoughts, when you have scope to explore and experiment, then only you can build beautiful human beings from your kids. The students, they need relaxation, they need mindfulness. That is only possible when you have free mind. You have to be really very smart, very innovative, very interactive, very joyful and interesting. Then only kids are going to love you. And that is the only thing that makes them boost up. And I think this teaching is not just a profession, it's a passion for me. And because of this passion only, I feel that if I'm able to bring a change even in the life of students, even if just one student or two students, I am bringing change in their thoughts, in their ideas, progressive change and growth mindset. That is really very important. So I would say freedom of thoughts expression is really important for me and for my kids.
So Aarti, this is amazing because when you speak not only about what you experience, but also about what you think other teachers need to feel that experience. And let me walk to, Deciman. And Deciman, uh, given Uganda's context, and there was an article I was reading from George Wilson, and it was on universal primary education program in Uganda and its ugly truths. Given that aspect, what are the expectations from a primary teacher in the country where you belong to?
Thank you, AJ, for that great question. Uh, our education system and as education leaders, it is very, very unique, especially here in Uganda. And I would say that a primary expectation of a teacher, number one, is to ensure that children are learning, but they are learning through a designed curriculum that has been authorized by the country or the ministry. So in that way, if the curriculum develops some weird kind of loopholes and there is no willingness from the stakeholders to make amendments, the expectation of a teacher to deliver as efficient as he would desire through creativity gets frustrated.
Do are teachers decision makers? And in your landscape, if you could share your account, how your experience has been working with different teachers, and especially when you were thinking about starting and founding the school, what thought process was going in your mind around that?
So if I think about teachers as decision makers and teachers as professionals with agency or who ideally ought to have agency, it's quite a complicated picture to me. So if I think about policy decisions, say about curriculum, about class sizes, about the arrangement of the school year, about assessment, about, as Deciman mentioned, language of instruction, teachers are not included sufficiently in those kinds of decisions, that they're not consulted properly. School leaders, nor are school leaders consulted properly in these decisions. And even when those big policy decisions are made, teachers are not really prepared adequately to be able to implement those decisions. So I think when it comes to policy level decisions, teachers are excluded from the decision itself, and they're not engaged in properly in preparing to implement those policy decisions. I think if we think about the teacher as a decision maker in their own classroom, there are lots of constraints on teachers. So they have to be worrying about things like, as Deciman mentioned, promotion. Like, do I get to promote this child or do I not? Like, they have to be thinking about those kinds of things. They're also making complicated decisions about resources. So resources are more often than not constrained, right? And inadequate for what you really want to do with students. And so teachers are constantly making decisions about how to use those resources. In that, I would also include the teacher's time, right? You don't have a lot of time in the classroom with your students. So which students are you going to focus on and why and how? When it comes to planning, theoretically, teachers have choices over how to use their time. So they ought to be able to make decisions about when to plan and how much to plan and what to plan. But in reality, teachers have quite a big administrative burden in some countries. They also have quite a high teaching load in most countries, and that to put some certain constraints around the decisions they can make about planning and about teaching. And I realize as I'm talking through these things that I'm sounding quite negative about teachers' decision-making capabilities. But that's the reality that I've observed over the last years in most schools, that teachers don't, in reality, have as much freedom as they ought to have over what to teach and how to teach, and how long they can spend on those different things.
That makes sense. And that is really helpful to understand that decision making is constrained not only systemically, but also given the conditions of the classroom and the prerequisite trainings which they've received also. So it is an amalgamation of all those three elements. Let's jump to Aarti, and then there was a beautiful example in one of your YouTube videos which I had seen, and that was during pandemic when you were doing puppets and stories,
Right.
and there were certain students who trusted you with
Exactly.
the discomfort they share about the absence of sanitary napkins. Now, how did that happen in the first place? And in person, that's so difficult. They trusted you digitally. So what is that role of the teacher? I would just love to learn more about that experience,
Actually,
and what does that mean being a teacher?
thank you so much for watching that video. I am really blessed, I would say, because I have such kids who have faith in me. That's a blessing for me, I would say. And this has happened not just in 1 day, 2 day, or 1 month. The relationship has the relationship that I share with my kids. It took a long time of my persistent, like I would say, efforts to connect with my students. Like before pandemic also, I was educating my girl students about menstrual hygiene and menstruation, and about this breaking this taboo of menstruation and periods and everything. And I used to take sessions of my students, educate them, aware them. I took sessions of their parents as well, went to community and interacted with the mothers and fathers also, I would say, both men and women. Talked about them, asked them, what do you feel about this periods and menstruation? And I was really very excited to know that although everybody was like, shh, 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 don't talk about it, it's a taboo, you must understand this, but everybody wanted to talk about it. Humble background to like to arrange for these sanitary napkins, because for them it is something very expensive. So it's really difficult for them to afford that, even just one or two sanitary napkins, and they were using old cloth material and old garments, I would say. They used to tear that and use that for in their needy hours. So just because we have this connect beautiful relationship of connect with my students, I used to share stories through puppets to explain them what menstruation is through these puppets, and they uh, I would say they trusted me. That was I would say biggest achievement and award for me, that their trust and faith on me, and they opened up their heart. They told me that, ma'am, this is the problem, that I am not able to arrange sanitary napkins, just because it's very hard to even arrange for two meals.
At one point, there is this teacher who's individual, right hearted, wants to understand the students. On the other hand, there's a system which can enable, which can disable. If you have to
Yes.
leave with two messages, each one of you, one message for the decision makers and one message for the teacher who is part of this system right now, what would that message be for the decision makers? What would that message be for the teacher? Starting with Tamara first, then Aarti, and then Decima.
Thank you.
My message for decision makers would be to pay teachers more because they deserve it, and we need to attract people into teaching rather than putting people off teaching because of its poor pay and conditions. And in addition to better pay, teachers also need better working conditions. So they need to be trained well, and they need to be given a reasonable number of students to teach and adequate resources and time to do so. I think a good comparison that I would ask policymakers to think about is, would we expect a doctor to treat 100 patients in one room for 45 or even 35 minutes at a time, and then send all those patients out and say, okay, you're done. And then they bring another batch of 100 patients in and they get 35 minutes to treat those patients. That's something that we don't ask of doctors. Why on earth are we asking that of teachers? And my message to teachers would be that I just appreciate you so much. You transform students every day. You do it without enough recognition and without enough pay. And I truly appreciate people who are willing to sacrifice like that for students. And on your most difficult days as a teacher, I would encourage you to remember that teachers hardly ever see the fruit, like the real fruit of their efforts. That's going to come years later when an adult is walking down the street and thinking about something that you've said to them a long time ago.
Teachers need appreciation and respect, I would say. You have given us the guidelines for the curriculum, for everything. We just need appreciation and respect. Respect for what we do, and appreciation for our relationship with our students and how we contribute in implementing all the strategies, all the curriculum, all the guidelines which are given by you. So this is really important, which motivates the teachers to do and give their best. And for the teachers, I would say, I love you for everything you do for the kids, because you are the catalyst, I would say. You are the one who can bring the change in the lives of people, and you are the only one who is able to create that human being, craft that human being, I would say, from the individual. So teachers, you are creating and crafting human lives. I love you for that. And I want you always stay motivated and I would say intrinsically motivated, because you are the one who brings the change in the world. And for this, don't look here and there. It's within you. See the smile on the faces of kids you teach. That is the best award. That is the greatest reward that God has given us. So just look at the smiles of your kids, the happy faces of your students, and you're gonna love your profession, your passion. Thank you.
Thank you, Aarti. Desaman.
Thank you, Hajj. For the decision makers, I would guide that let them begin by collecting data that informs their decision from right to the teachers, the schools, on the ground. Some people scatter themselves in their posh offices, then they make very, very serious decisions that impact the common person without even allowing the common person to put in their thought. And we think that one is not good for collective leadership. Another thing that I also want to re-echo is what Tamara said: a teacher needs good pay. And unless we are intentional in terms of resourcing the teacher, the education department, and all the human resources there, we will not be in a position to deliver the service that is transformative, and it can allow everybody to see how creative and revolutionizing the teachers can be. For the teachers, the message is that claim your space as leaders. Stop limiting yourself to just seeing yourself as a teacher. My belief is that a teacher is a leader. And with the leadership, you should be very, very creative, solution-oriented, and gather people, the will and the support of your parents, of your children, of your superintendents, to cause them appreciate your ideas by evidence. You should back them by evidence. And in that way, you will shine as a leader who is problem solving. We will not go far with the lamentation all through, because if at all the person you are lamenting to has no solution and you have an idea, front your idea, start work on your idea, and before you know, it will catch up with them, and then you will be supported in the right way.
Thank you. Thank you, each one of you. I think it's such a rewarding journey, even to understand that the space in the classroom to be safe, the entire community has to be supportive. The entire community has to be an enabling environment. Thank you. There's much more to talk about this, and I'm sure you in your drawing rooms will start those conversations further. On behalf of the podcast, Maple Advisories, Unquestioned Questions, thank you for tuning into this powerful dialogue. Thank you, Aarti. Thank you, Deciman. Thank you, Tamara.
And that's all, folks. That's your dose of Maple today. We look forward to having you tune in again very soon.